The grand hall of Zithra Palace shimmered under thousands of soft lights. The walls glowed with patterns that shifted like flowing water, and floating crystal orbs cast warm beams across the polished floors. The court was bustling with activity. Nobles walking quickly to their assigned places, advisors whispering in low tones, and guards standing motionless with weapons that gleamed with alien metal. At the center of it all sat Queen Aerolith, the ruler of Zithra, her regal form draped in flowing robes of sapphire and silver. Her long silver hair shimmered under the lights, and her piercing violet eyes observed every movement. Today was meant to be a normal day of court proceedings, with petitions from the lower colonies and advice on the Empire's trade policies. Yet something entirely unexpected had just happened that had frozen everyone in place. A small blonde child, no more than 7 Zithran years old, stood at the far end of the hall, pointing at a visitor. His eyes were wide and his voice rang out across the grand hall clear and unyielding. "You, motherfucker!" the child shouted. The entire court froze. Nobles gasped, some clutching their robes, others whispering in horrified tones. Guards stiffened, unsure whether to step forward or wait for the Queen's command. Even the floating orbs seemed to dim slightly, as if the room itself could sense the shock. At the center of the court, the human man simply smiled. He did not flinch, did not raise his voice, and did not respond in anger. He simply looked down at the child with a mixture of amusement and patience. His dark hair was messy, and his uniform, though clearly of human origin, was simple and practical. He carried no weapons that anyone could see, yet his presence alone radiated calm confidence. Queen Aerolith rose from her throne in a rush of flowing fabric, her eyes narrowing on the human. Her voice, sharp and commanding, echoed through the hall. "Explain yourself, human," she demanded. "Why is my grandchild using forbidden language toward you? Is this some trick? Some insult meant to mock the throne?" The human bowed slightly, his dark eyes calm but sparkling with a hint of humor. "Your Majesty, I think your grandchild is just speaking what he sees." "Nothing more." The Queen's violet eyes widened in disbelief. "Nothing more? That child has called you a word that no Zithran would dare speak outside of private shame. And you say, nothing more?" The human smiled again, this time with a little shrug. "Sometimes truth comes out in strange ways. Humans raise children to speak honestly, even when it surprises others." A murmur went through the court. Honest, speaking without fear? That was a concept almost alien to Zithran society. On Zithra, children were taught respect, obedience, and above all caution. They were expected to never question authority and to always address adults, especially royalty, with carefully chosen words that reflected their place. But this human, he seemed unshaken. He seemed almost proud. The child, sensing that the human was not angry, repeated in a softer voice, "You told the guards to leave the bridge unlocked. And the thief got the crown." Now the entire court was silent. The accusation hung in the air like a heavy weight. The human's calm smile did not waver. "I did, and that's why I'm here, to fix it," the human said simply. "Sometimes mistakes happen. The important thing is what we do next." The Queen's eyebrows furrowed. Mistakes? To an alien monarch, mistakes were unthinkable. Order and control were the pillars of their civilization. Yet here was a human, standing in the middle of her court, unafraid of her authority, calmly admitting to failure, and somehow commanding respect. Her grandchild, encouraged by the human's calm, looked up at Queen Aerolith and repeated the word again, louder this time. "Motherfucker!" The Queen's heart raced. This was unheard of. Her advisors whispered urgently, some suggesting immediate punishment, others urging calm, but the human only chuckled softly, a sound that seemed almost human enough to make one uncomfortable in its casual defiance. "Your Majesty," the human said, "he is not being rude. He is being honest. Humans believe honesty is more important than fear. He sees someone who acted boldly and he calls it as he sees it." The Queen's lips pressed together. Boldness, fearless honesty? These were dangerous qualities in her court. And yet the human's presence made her feel intrigued. "Boldness is not the same as disrespect," she said sharply. "And fear is what keeps this court alive. Your words are dangerous. Your behavior is reckless." "I do not seek to disrupt," the human replied calmly. "I seek to solve problems. And sometimes solving problems means seeing truth without hiding behind fear." The Queen's grandchild looked at the human with admiration, as if seeing a hero in front of him. He had never looked at his elders this way.
He had never imagined someone could be so fearless, so unshakable. The queen, seeing this, felt a strange mix of irritation and curiosity.
She had ruled Zithera for centuries. She had faced warlords, spies, and even assassins without flinching. And yet this human made her question everything she thought she knew about courage. "You dare speak in ways no child should," she finally said, though her voice trembled slightly, not from fear, but from confusion. "And yet you seem unharmed." The human smiled again. "Your Majesty, fear is useful, but courage is stronger. Fear keeps people in line. Courage lets them act. Even children." The court was stunned into silence. Even the most loyal advisors could not refute the logic. The human's words were strange, yes, but undeniable. Queen Aerolith's mind raced. She had heard stories of humans, of their unpredictability, their ingenuity, their fearless nature. But to see it in front of her, in her court, with her own grandchild shouting a forbidden word, it was something entirely different. Something she could not ignore. She took a deep breath. "Human," she said slowly, "you will remain here. You will answer my questions. Every word, every action, and every reason your presence is tolerated in this court. And you will explain. Why does my grandchild speak this word at you without fear?" The human nodded. "I will, Your Majesty. But first, may I speak to the child?" The queen's eyes narrowed. "You may. But remember, children do not lie lightly. And in Zithera, disrespect has consequences." The human knelt slightly to be at eye level with the grandchild. He spoke in simple, firm words. "I do not fear your words because I do not hide from truth. You spoke what you saw, and that is brave. Never let anyone tell you that truth is bad. Even a queen must listen." The child blinked. Then slowly a wide grin spread across his face. He seemed proud, brave, alive. He had never felt so bold in the presence of his elders. And for the first time he understood something fundamental about humans. They were unpredictable, fearless, and strangely wise. The queen watched silently, her mind churning. The court whispered around her, but she barely noticed. Here was a human, standing calmly in her palace, unafraid of her power, unshaken by her traditions, and somehow influencing her own grandchild. The halls of Zithera Palace were quieter than usual after the commotion earlier. Nobles and advisors whispered in corners, some clutching their robes as if the mere presence of the human threatened their dignity. Yet in the midst of this uneasy calm, the young grandchild, Kale, remained near Captain Jace Harper, eyes wide with admiration. Queen Aerolith paced slowly before her throne. Her mind raced with questions. How could this human, barely appearing as more than a traveler, so boldly withstand the offense of her own family? How could a single human without weapons or influence inspire courage in a child who had never dared defy authority? "Human," she began, her voice calm but edged with steel. "You must explain yourself. Why does my grandchild speak these words to you without fear? Have you taught him to disrespect royalty?" Jace's dark eyes remained calm. He bowed slightly, hands behind his back. "Your Majesty, I have not taught him anything. He saw truth and he spoke it. That is all." The queen's violet eyes narrowed. "Truth? To a human, truth allows a child to curse a guest in the royal court?" Jace smiled faintly. "Humans teach children to speak honestly. We believe that honesty, even when uncomfortable, is better than hiding behind fear. He sees me and he trusts what he sees. That is natural." The advisors murmured in disbelief. One of them, High Counselor Veleth, stepped forward. His long arms gestured nervously. "Your Majesty, this is dangerous. This human teaches children to defy authority. If the young Kale acts on this lesson, the palace could descend into chaos." Jace shook his head slowly. "No, Counselor. I teach no one to disobey for its own sake. I show that understanding and responsibility come first. Respect and courage can coexist. Fear should never replace thought." The queen's mind swirled. Fear, obedience, hierarchy. These were the foundations of her rule. Yet the human's calm, measured words hinted at a philosophy unlike anything she had known. She could sense the potential, both for risk and for strength. "Do you mean to tell me," she said finally, "that humans train their children to speak freely, even to kings, queens, or elders?" Jace inclined his head. "Yes, Your Majesty. We encourage children to see the world clearly and act honestly. It is not disrespect. It is preparation. Children learn to think, to judge, and to act without hiding behind rules or fear." The queen felt her chest tighten. This concept was dangerous, and yet strangely fascinating. She glanced at Kale, who had not moved from Jace's side. The boy's eyes shone with excitement, admiration, and a sudden understanding of bravery. Kyle had never felt so bold in his life, and you? Courage. The morning sun streamed through the tall crystal windows of Zithra Palace, casting patterns of light across the polished floor. The grand hall was unusually tense. Whispers echoed between nobles and advisors, their faces filled with unease. Today, a human, a being no one could fully understand, had begun to challenge centuries of tradition, simply by being himself. Queen Aerolith sat on her throne, her hands folded in her lap. Her violet eyes scanned the hall, noting the nervous glances, the stiff postures, and the murmured debates. She understood the unrest. Her court had always relied on obedience, hierarchy, and fear to maintain order. The arrival of Captain Jace Harper, a human, had disrupted everything. Jace stood near the center of the hall, calm as ever, his dark eyes observing the room with a quiet intensity. Around him, children of noble families lingered, curious, inspired, and even emboldened by his presence. Among them, Kale, the Queen's grandchild, stood a little taller, his eyes bright with admiration and courage. High Counselor Velith stepped forward, his voice rising above the whispers. "Your Majesty, this human is dangerous. His influence over the children, over Kale himself, is unprecedented. We cannot allow his methods to corrupt the values of Zithra." "Corrupt?" Queen Aerolith asked, her voice steady but carrying an edge of curiosity. "And what values are these? Obedience without question? Fear without courage?" Velith's eyes flicked to the floor. "Respect, Majesty. Fear ensures respect. Without it, the court could descend into chaos. If Kale learns to follow only what he believes is right, the very foundation of our empire could be threatened." Jace stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "Majesty, respect earned through fear is fragile. True respect comes from understanding, courage, and action. Kale respects you, yes, but he also respects what is right. That is stronger than fear." A murmur ran through the court. Some nobles shifted nervously, clearly unsettled by his words. They had spent lifetimes teaching children to obey without question, to fear punishment more than dishonor. And yet this human, standing unarmed and unafraid, challenged centuries of tradition, with nothing more than calm words and quiet authority. The Queen's gaze softened slightly as she observed Kale. The boy had grown braver in the days since Jace arrived. He questioned small orders politely but firmly. He noticed when advisors were careless or dishonest, and he acted even when action carried a risk. "Perhaps," she said quietly, "there is merit in what this human teaches. Fear may control, but courage inspires. Truth may shock, but it teaches." Velith's face paled. "Your Majesty, if this influence spreads, you risk weakening the palace, the court, and even the loyalty of the colonies." "We cannot underestimate the danger." Jace nodded slightly. "I do not seek to undermine you, Majesty. I seek only to show what humans know, that courage, honesty, and action can create strength stronger than fear. Kale already demonstrates this. He acts bravely because he believes it is right, not because he fears punishment." Queen Aerolith leaned back in her throne, her mind racing. She had faced assassins, spies, and political rivals without fear, yet this human's philosophy challenged her in ways no enemy ever had. It was not just a threat, it was an opportunity. "Very well," she said finally. "You will remain. You will teach what you will, but under my observation. Every lesson, every action, and every influence must be known to me." Jace bowed. "Understood, Majesty. I do not hide from your observation. Humans learn and grow from guidance just as Zithrans do. The difference is in courage and honesty, not fear." As the day progressed, the palace buzzed with subtle tension. Advisors whispered warnings to one another. Children exchanged curious glances, and nobles struggled to hide both fascination and fear. Kale, however, remained confident. He followed Jace as he moved through the palace, eager to learn. Jace began to demonstrate human ways of problem-solving. In the palace kitchens, he noticed that food supplies were mismanaged. Instead of scolding the staff, he calmly organized a system that tracked inventory and reduced waste. The kitchen staff, initially suspicious, followed his instructions, and the results were immediate. Efficiency improved, and even some of the advisors could not deny the effectiveness. In the armory, Jace examined the security protocols. Zithra relied heavily on guards and enchanted defenses, yet the human quickly identified flaws that could allow a clever thief to bypass them. He explained his reasoning clearly. showing Kale how observation, logic, and action could prevent disaster without relying solely on fear or punishment. Word spread quickly among the court. Some nobles whispered approval. Others muttered warnings. Velith remained adamant, insisting that humans were dangerous and unpredictable, but even he could not argue against results. The palace was functioning more efficiently, and the children led by Kale began to mimic the humans' focus, observation, and courage. Queen Aerolith observed silently. Her grandchild's eyes now shone with determination rather than fear. Kale asked questions, suggested improvements, and even politely corrected minor mistakes in the court. The queen realized something profound. Humans had a way of inspiring courage and action in others that Zithara's fear-based system could not. Later that evening, the queen convened a private council. Only her most trusted advisors were present. Velith spoke first, urgency in his voice. "Your Majesty, the human's influence is spreading. Kale is no longer a timid child. He challenges advisors politely but firmly. If this continues, the court itself could lose control." Queen Aerolith leaned forward, her eyes thoughtful. "Control is not the same as strength. Humans teach action, courage, and truth. Kale is learning to think, observe, and act without fear. That is strength." Velith shook his head. "But Majesty, it is unpredictable. Human methods are chaotic. They may inspire bravery, yes, but they also risk rebellion, disrespect, and disobedience." The queen's gaze hardened slightly. Perhaps the unpredictability is the point. Fear keeps people in line, but it does not inspire greatness. Courage does. Kale is already stronger than he was yesterday. He sees more, he acts more, and he is respected, not feared. That is something we cannot ignore. Jace, who had been quietly observing, spoke softly. "Your Majesty, humans understand that growth requires risk. To teach courage, we must allow mistakes. To inspire honesty, we must accept truth even when it is uncomfortable. Kale is learning this, and in learning, he grows stronger." The queen's mind whirled. She had ruled Zithara for centuries. She had seen armies fall, rivals betray, and spies infiltrate the palace. Yet this human, this single, unarmed man, was changing her court with nothing more than wisdom, patience, and courage. Velith sighed, frustrated but resigned. "Majesty, if you insist on allowing this influence, then we must at least monitor it closely." "I fear the consequences." Queen Aerolith nodded. "We will monitor, but we will also observe carefully what this human teaches. Sometimes, the greatest lessons arrive from unexpected places." The day ended with Kale standing beside Jace in the grand hall. The young boy's chest was full of pride and courage. He had witnessed the human's patience, his cleverness, and his ability to act decisively when needed. For the first time, Kale felt that he could think, act, and speak boldly, even in the presence of royalty. Jace placed a hand on Kale's shoulder. "Remember, Kale, courage and truth go together. You must act when it is right, even when others are afraid. That is what makes a leader." The child nodded eagerly. "I understand. I will try, Jace." The queen, watching silently from her throne, felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps humans were more than just unpredictable beings. Perhaps their strength lay not in weapons or magic, but in courage, honesty, and the power to inspire others. As the palace settled into quiet for the night, the court remained divided. Some feared the humans' influence, others were fascinated. And Kale, the queen's grandchild, had already begun a quiet transformation, emboldened by what he had learned. In the silence of the palace, the queen whispered to herself, "This is only the beginning. Humans are unlike anything we have known, and we must watch carefully." The winds of Zithara's night swirled outside, carrying with them the promise of change, subtle, dangerous, and powerful. The court would never be the same. The palace of Zithara was alive with whispers. Courtier, servants, and guards all spoke quietly about the human, Captain Jace Harper, who had somehow earned the attention of the queen's beloved grandchild, Kale. At first, many thought the boy was only fascinated by the stranger's strange clothes, sharp eyes, and unusual words. But it was becoming clear that something deeper was happening. Kyle was changing. The child, once timid and cautious, now walked with more confidence. He asked sharper questions. He spoke with a new tone, one that made the other children in the palace listen closely. Some nobles noticed this and grew worried. Others were curious. But all agreed on one thing. The human was at the center of it. One morning, Queen Aerolith called Kale into her chamber. She studied him carefully, her violet eyes thoughtful. "My child," she said, "I hear you repeat strange words these days. You speak boldly. You act without hesitation. Tell me, where is this coming from?" Kyle hesitated, then answered honestly. "From Jace, grandmother. He teaches me. He shows me things I didn't know. He says courage is stronger than fear. He says truth is better than silence." The queen raised an eyebrow. "And do you believe this?" Kale nodded firmly. "Yes, wait." The grand hall of Zithra Palace was quiet in the early morning. Sunlight streamed through the crystal windows, casting patterns on the polished floor. The court was beginning to stir, but there was a tension, a sense of anticipation in the air. Today, Queen Aerolith had summoned Captain Jace Harper for a private audience, an audience that would finally bring clarity to the question that had haunted her since his arrival. The human entered the throne room calmly, as he always did. His dark eyes scanned the room briefly before settling on the queen. He bowed slightly, a gesture of respect, though completely unlike the elaborate courtesies Zythera demanded. Kale followed closely behind, eager, attentive, and now radiating confidence. The queen studied him for a long moment. "Human," she said, her voice steady but carrying curiosity and authority. "You have been here for weeks. You have taught my grandchild courage, honesty, and wisdom beyond his years. You have solved problems in my court that even my advisors could not. And yet, I must ask the question I began with. Why does my grandchild dare to call you?" "That word?" Jace met her gaze calmly. "Your Majesty, it is not a word of disrespect. It is recognition." The queen blinked. "Recognition?" "Yes," Jace said. "Humans raise their children to see truth even when it is uncomfortable. Kale sees honesty, courage, and action in me. He recognizes those qualities and calls them as he sees them. That is why he spoke that word. Not to insult, but to mark respect for someone who acts boldly." Kale's eyes widened, and he looked at Jace with admiration. "I did it because I saw what you did. You didn't hide when things went wrong. You acted to fix them." I wanted to say, "I noticed." The queen's violet eyes softened slightly. She had spent centuries teaching children discipline, obedience, and hierarchy, but she had never seen a child speak truthfully, directly, and with respect at the same time. Kale had learned something different. He had learned courage, intelligence, and honesty from a human. "And you," she said, turning to Jace, "you encourage this in all humans?" "I do," Jace replied. "We believe that courage and honesty are stronger than fear. We teach our children to act rightly, even when it is difficult. We trust observation, reason, and responsibility to guide them. Fear may control, but courage inspires. Respect gained through courage lasts longer than respect gained through fear." The queen remained silent for a moment, absorbing his words. She thought of her court, her advisors, and the centuries of tradition that had ruled Zithera, and she thought of Kale, bold, brave, and honest. The child's transformation had been subtle but profound. He now questioned ideas politely but firmly, acted decisively when needed, and observed situations clearly before acting. "Perhaps," she said softly, almost to herself, "I have underestimated humans, not for their strength or their weapons or even their cunning, but for their courage, wisdom, and honesty." Jace inclined his head. "Humans are different, Majesty." "That is true. We do not rely solely on fear or status. We act because it is right, because it is needed. That is how we survive and grow." Kale spoke up, his voice filled with pride. "Jace, thank you. I want to keep learning. I want to be brave and honest and strong like you." Jace smiled, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder. "You already are, Kale. Bravery is not about being fearless. It is about acting rightly even when others are afraid. Honesty is not about words alone. It is about choosing truth over comfort. You have learned well." The queen watched silently, her expression softening into a smile she rarely showed. She realized something profound. Humans had a power that went beyond technology, magic, or tradition. They inspired courage. They taught truth. They led by example, not by fear. "Very well," she said finally, her voice carrying calm authority. "Captain Jace Harper, you have proven that humans are unlike any other species I have encountered. You have taught my grandchild, influenced my court, and solved problems where our traditions might have failed. Your methods are unconventional but effective. You have my respect, Jace bowed. Thank you, Majesty. That means more than words. Velith, the High Counselor, who had watched quietly from the side, spoke reluctantly. Your Majesty, perhaps humans are stronger in ways we cannot fully understand. I will observe, and I see that Kale is wiser for his learning. The Queen nodded. Observe closely, Counselor. But remember this. Strength is not measured only by obedience or fear. Sometimes courage, honesty, and action shape the future more than centuries of control. The day passed quietly, but the palace felt different. The air seemed lighter, more open. Nobles whispered to each other. Children laughed and practiced observation and bravery. And Kale stood taller, his confidence evident in every step. Even the advisors began to question some of their old ways. Realizing that the lessons Jace taught were not dangerous, they were powerful. Later, as the sun set and painted the palace in gold and violet, the Queen called Kale to her side. She studied the child closely, her eyes reflecting a mixture of pride and contemplation. Kyle, she said, what you have learned from this human, it is rare. Courage and honesty will serve you well. Do not forget these lessons. The court may resist change, but truth will always endure. Kale nodded solemnly. I won't forget, Grandmother. Jace showed me how to act rightly even when others are afraid. The Queen smiled faintly, a rare warmth in her eyes. She had seen many leaders come and go, many advisors rise and fall, but never had she witnessed a lesson so quietly revolutionary. A human had changed her grandchild, and through him, perhaps even her court and empire. That evening, the Queen walked quietly through the palace gardens. She observed the stars above Zithera, sparkling in the dark sky. She thought of Jace Harper, of Kale, and of the subtle but undeniable change that had begun. Humans were unpredictable, yes, unorthodox, certainly, but they carried a strength that Zithera had never fully known. The courage to speak truth, the wisdom to act rightly, and the ability to inspire others to do the same. The palace was quiet, but within its walls a small revolution had begun. Not of weapons, not of magic, but of mind, courage, and principle. Children now had examples to follow that taught them more than obedience. Nobles had witnessed methods that challenged centuries of tradition. And the Queen, once rigid and cautious, had glimpsed the power of humans, their audacity, their wisdom, and their unshakable courage. Kyle, standing near the human, whispered, Jace, do you think one day other humans will come here? Jace smiled. Perhaps, but you don't need them. You have learned enough to act, to think, and to inspire. Remember this. Courage and honesty are stronger than fear. Trust yourself, Kale, and you can face anything. The child's eyes sparkled. For the first time, he felt a strength that came from understanding, not obedience. A power that came from action, not fear. A confidence that came from courage and truth. Queen Aerolith watched silently, the weight of centuries in her heart. Perhaps humans were not merely visitors or outsiders. Perhaps they were teachers, guides, and examples. Reminders that strength could take form she had never imagined. As the stars of Zithera shone brightly, the Queen whispered to herself, the child sees the truth. And the human. He has shown me that courage, wisdom, and honesty will shape the future in ways I cannot yet foresee. And so, in the quiet of the palace, a lesson was never forgotten. Not for Kale, not for the court, and not for the Queen. Humans had arrived not as conquerors, but as teachers. And their lesson, the power of truth, courage, and action, would echo through Zithera for generations to come. The human, standing calmly beside the child, looked toward the stars. He had done no more than act rightly, speak honestly, and remain unshaken. Yet his presence had left a mark that no one in the palace could deny. The Queen smiled softly, and for the first time in centuries she felt that Zithera's future was not only secure, it was stronger than ever, thanks to a human. The day began with an unusual tension in Zithera Palace. The nobles had gathered in the grand hall, their faces a mixture of curiosity, suspicion, and in some cases awe. Word of the human's influence over the young Kale had spread, and whispers of dangerous wisdom floated among the high-ranking officials. Queen Aerolith sat upon her throne, her violet eyes fixed on Captain Jace Harper. The human stood quietly in the center of the hall, his posture relaxed, his dark eyes calm and steady. Even after weeks in the palace, he had not shown fear, annoyance, or impatience. His mere presence seemed to radiate confidence, and the court could not help but feel unsettled by it. Today, the Queen had decided to test Jace's philosophy. A political challenge had arisen. A delegation from a rival faction demanded trade rights that could destabilize Zithra's economy. Traditionally, the Queen's advisors would handle negotiations with strict protocol, intimidation, and careful manipulation, but the human's methods had intrigued her. Perhaps he could succeed where conventional diplomacy might fail. "Human," the Queen said, her voice echoing across the hall. "You will negotiate with the delegation. You must achieve an agreement that benefits Zithra. If you fail, the consequences will fall on your methods, not my advisors." Jace inclined his head respectfully. "Understood, Majesty. I will do my best." The rival delegation entered the hall. Their leader, a tall, sharp-eyed Zithran named Lord Rethor, bowed deeply but did not hide his skepticism. He had heard of the humans' unusual influence over the palace and Wandi,